guys, this is Rich Hart. I want to thank you very much and welcome to the program. All right, today I'm with a real dear friend of mine, John Mangham. Over the many years, John, right? And he's with Craft 1031. And today itself, we're going to be talking about that 1031 exchange. John, we have been in this industry for a period of time. All righty. 1031 is this active backstage, backdoor operation that people themselves sometimes are afraid to get involved and sometimes they want to get involved. So, John, let's talk about what this 1031 is about. Let's talk about Craft, all right, 1031, and first an introduction to our audience themselves. Who is John Mangham?
Rich, I appreciate being here. You know, every opportunity you give me to be in your studios, I enjoy it. And the more than 20 years you and I have spent together have been a lot of fun. But being the 1031 guy, as you know I've been for almost 4 decades now, I've seen a lot of transactions. I'd like to say I've seen it all, but I know better than that. Section 1031 of the tax code. Good gosh, are we talking the tax code?
Already, John? I think it's a little bit too early to talk tax code right now, is it? No, not at all.
It's the reason people are concerned, confused. They want to approach it. They don't want to approach it. It has to do with taxes. And that's not pleasant for anybody to talk about.
Not in this day and age.
But it's been with us for over 100 years. And the thing that you say when you say 1031 is that it's a 1031 exchange. 1031 is the section number of the tax code. We're not pulling that book out. We just put everybody to sleep. Exchange is the word we're going to focus on. And the exchange in the old days was two people who had property swapping deeds, literally deed for deed. I'm going to swap my 100 acres of land up in this section of the valley for your 100 acres of land down here where I have some other property. And they would do exchanges. And because real estate was largely illiquid, the IRS said that transaction doesn't have to be taxed if you give up property and you get back property. The fundamental concept of a 1031 is a continuity of ownership. So I'm going to give up a property. I'm going to get rid of, or relinquish is the word we use in our industry. You relinquish a property and you acquire a replacement so you continue your interest, continuity of interest. Pretty easy to put my hands around that without getting deep into the tax mechanics.
Sure.
So a 1031 is the informal term we use. A 1031 is all about giving up a property and acquiring a replacement. Today, there are a lot of rules around it. The rules didn't happen overnight. They came about through court cases. They came about through private letter rulings. They came about through all kinds of industry activities. And today, the rules are pretty well set. We've got a stable 1031 industry. It's been stable since the late 70s when the final Treasury regulations came out. And today, it's approachable. Folks who have a rental house, for example, can approach doing a 1031. Years ago, 1031 was the province of big investors with big attorneys and big money. The little guys just didn't do it, didn't approach it. And as much as I think I've taught the world all about 1031, because I've been teaching classes on 1031.
And even taught me, folks, all right? That's where this all came from, all right?
And of course, I've been teaching classes for more than 30 years, and I think I've taught the world, and yet we get a class together, and somebody asks a question, and I realize, let's walk through the basics. Let's be sure they walk before they start running.
And I know there's a lot of basic things, and I know even in the 1031, those individuals themselves were starting to get a lot of your education and parts of interest of getting folks involved in this 1031 was when they were starting to get into real estate. And there was too much, all right, at that particular time to hit them. And all of a sudden you come in, you got a 3-hour class, and you're going to hit them on tax and 1031 and how to exchange and the like kind, and you're going to throw them over the edge. There's some basic principles here, some basic items of opportunity itself that we can take and to understand this a little easier. And so I think that's what we're going to start to do. We're going to start to break down some of those easy elements, or the essential elements already, and maybe some of the strategies. And then how today's real estate perspective is really taking a good look at this 1031 and how they can utilize it to benefit as a part of the business. And so we talked about a little bit about some of these essentials. Let's break into some of these, the essentials of the 1031.
So, Rich, if we talk about the essential elements of a 1031 exchange, and we talk about it in citizen speak, not lawyer speak, not CPA speak, not investor speak, just how do you carry on a conversation about a 1031? There are 4 essential elements, and they're pretty straightforward. At its core, while we talk about a continuity of ownership, that's the premise that the 1031 is built on, it's about saving taxes. If you sell a property and you're going to have a profit in that sale, you're going to have a gain, capital gain.
Capital gain, right.
There's capital gains tax. So a 1031 exchange properly structured is about saving capital gains taxes when you're selling that property. So the first concept of a 1031, the first essential element, is that it's about saving taxes. So one of the reasons I think I've taught everybody about 1031 is because it's federal tax law, and you can teach this topic in all 50 states.
Good. Excellent.
It applies to everybody in this United States. It applies to everybody that owns real estate in the United States that is selling investment property for a profit. So the first essential element is tax savings. And we can break that down further. We can talk about federal capital gains tax. There's a 5%, 15%, and a 20% layer. There's depreciation.
Whoa. Hold on tight, folks. All right, hold on. We're getting it.
Our eyes are glazing over. They're going to roll back in our head. Let's don't go all the way there. We're going to save a little bit of that, the scope of the problem, when we get into the material. When we talk for 3 hours, we're going to build a problem and build how you get where you are today.
Good.
But when we talk essential elements, it's about saving taxes. Number one, saving taxes. Number two, investment property. And you mentioned it a minute ago. I'm glad you did. It tells me you were paying attention when you were a student in one of my classes.
My God.
You said like kind. So you hear all kinds of things, 1031 exchange, swap, like-kind exchange, and it's all about the same provision of the tax code, Section 1031. But when we talk about like-kind exchange, the IRS doesn't talk like regular population talks.
No, of course not, no.
The world of 1031 is about investment property, and we say like-kind, and I'll say it's all alike as long as it's held for investment. Right. And that, at its most extreme example, a piece of raw land that you held for investment. You bought it 20 years ago for $100,000, right. 100 acres, or whatever you might have paid for it.
Right.
And today it's worth $1 million. You got a $900,000 gain.
All right, there you go.
You got a tax liability.
Without a doubt.
So can you sell that and do a like-kind exchange, a 1031 exchange? Of course you can. Sure. The answer to just about every question I want to pose is going to be yes. Can I buy rental houses? Can I buy commercial property? Can I buy improved property, and is that considered like-kind? And the answer is yes. And that's the first disconnect. When I'm in a program and people say, well, a like-kind exchange, if I sell a rental house, don't I have to buy a rental house? If I sell a piece of raw land, don't I have to buy raw land? No, sir. Category. It is all alike. And so it has nothing to do with local zoning. It's not RM 75, it's not commercial, it's not C1 or industrial, it's not zoning, it's not location, because you can sell a property in Georgia and you can buy a replacement property in California. Yeah. This is a business that allows me to operate literally in all 50 states. And I've taken calls from both Alaska and Hawaii to talk about faraway places. You can sell in those states and come back and buy anywhere in the United States. So like-kind or investment property is the second essential element. And it's one of the things to give a hint to some strategy. When I talk to real estate professionals, it's your area of opportunity, because the guy or gal, the investor with rental property, they reach the day when they're tired of tenants, toilets, and termites. The concept of like-kind is really your area of opportunity.
Right.
Any real estate professional that's working with a client who has something they don't want anymore. And as they go through their investing career, as they go through their life cycle, they want things, and then their needs change, and their wants and their goals and their families. And so like-kind is the biggest area of opportunity.
Yeah, well, the opportunity itself, we talked about some of those essentials. Now we're going to break in that essential three. All right, what's essential three all about?
So the reason number three is essential, over the years, 1031 exchange has morphed. The tax law has changed.
Changed constantly.
Of course. Years ago, there was a significant court case, and a taxpayer took 5 years to complete his exchange. The IRS went to the judge and said, it's not realistic to hold this thing open indefinitely. We need to put some brackets around this. And that was the beginning of a time period in a 1031 exchange.
Sure.
Today, that's been codified, and today you have 180 days to complete the exchange. Yeah. More specifically, and the people that I know in this industry still scratch their heads, we got a period to identify replacement property.
That's right, exactly.
So the third essential is time period. The first one is tax savings. The second one is investment property. The third one is time period. From the time you close and sell and relinquish that property, the clock starts running.
Yeah, without a doubt.
And if you've ever seen how fast 45 days goes by,
Quick.
it's faster than quick. It is absolutely, and I see this happen in a classroom all the time. I say, how fast is 45 days? And somebody will snap
their fingers, right, exactly.
Because they know. And so the real estate professional needs to be focused on these essential elements. And when they're talking to a client about a 1031, they need to know that 45 days is going to run. And don't tell me you're going to go out of town for the weekend and the next weekend it's raining and you can't go find replacement property, because an unsuccessful 1031 exchange results in paying the taxes. There's not an extra penalty. It's not going to harm you, but if you don't do the exchange and you set out to do it and you really had your sights set on other real estate and you let the time period get to you, then I'm going to say shame on you.
I'm saying most real estate professionals today, they know, and it's been in the tests and exams themselves, time of essence is extremely important in a transaction. Now in a 1031 is self-knowing itself to identify the 180 days themselves. That clock starts ticking. Okay, you need to start moving.
That's right.
Okay, and that's why. And we'll talk about the real estate agent's role itself in this, the intermediaries, where they sit in the whole plan program too as well. But now we're diving into that fourth essential. What is that fourth essential? I think it's extremely important here.
So I like to couch these essentials in fairly short phrases: tax savings, investment property, time period. The last one is equal or greater value. So if you're selling a rental property for, let's say, $500,000, you bought it during the downturn for $100,000. You got a nice gain. If you sell for $500, I'm going to tie back to that continuity of ownership. You got to own a replacement for $500 or greater.
Exactly.
Equal or greater.
Mm-hmm.
A subset of that is you've got to spend the cash, or the equity that comes out of the sale of the first property has got to be spent into the acquisition of the replacement, or replacements if you should choose to buy more than one.
Sure.
So when we talk about the essential elements and we talk about wrapping your head around what a 1031 is, I'm not going to pull out the tax code. I'm not going to pull out all the pages of regulations.
Ooh, hold on a second. Everybody's sweating. All right, good. I got it now.
The reason we're doing it this way is because it sets the stage for having confidence in approaching this topic.
Right.
The same client that you talked about that's a little hesitant to consider a 1031 exchange because it's confusing, because it's tax law.
Exactly.
It's tax savings. It's investment property. It's rental property. It's not your primary residence. It's a different category. It's time period. So we got to be on our game, and it's equal or greater. So those are the four essential elements, and that's what lets us get our hands around this and then go forward with confidence, talking to clients or doing it for ourselves. I find that in any given classroom, there will be some real estate professionals who are also the investor.
Sure.
And they'll ask me a question. They'll ask me a question. Would I be able to sell a piece of land and buy 3 rental houses? And then after the class is over, they'll come up and say, my brother and sister, I have this property, and how would I do this, and what do I do next? And they're asking for their own book of business.
In order to save face and save position.
Well, I have a client who.
I got you.
And that's a perfectly good way to approach that question.
Right,
Absolutely.
right. I think that's extremely important for those. We're going to be covering in our second segment out here is that, the important factors of today's real estate professional and where they sit. But before I jump into that, John, we've got to talk strategies and bringing the strategies to full form and full. We were talking about opportunities. How do we bring these strategies? We were talking about strategies of this 1031. Talk to me.
So, Rich, we've covered essential elements. And when you start to blend the elements and you put yourself in the position of talking to a client and you want to talk to them about a 1031,
right.
And you can say tax savings, time period, these things, right? And the client says, well, what do we do next? One of the favorite opportunities, one of the favorite times that a real estate agent should be talking to the client about a 1031 is when they're having the conversation about potentially listing the property to be sold.
There you go.
Rich, I'm going to sell your rental house, and you ought to consider a 1031. And you're going to say, what's that?
Exactly.
What's that? Yes, and everybody grins because that is what happens. And I'm going to say, it's about selling your investment property in a time period for equal or greater value to save the taxes. I'm stringing this together. What do we do? Now, the strategy would be, as we sign the listing agreement, let's peruse the market. Let's look at what you might consider buying.
Sure.
Your house may not sell. Your rental property may not sell for a few months. We may not bring it to the market till you get it painted and fixed up.
Whatever the case may be.
But we need to peruse the market. I need to show you some opportunities that would make sense based on your criteria. So the very first strategy when you expose 1031 to a client or a potential client is to do what Stephen Covey says. Start with the end in mind.
In the mind, right, exactly.
Boom. You've
one of the 7 habits.
So if I fall out of this chair, you've got the rest of this, right?
Oh, stay right there. Yeah, that's all good.
But seriously, you start with the end in mind. You think about where you want to be in your portfolio. While a 1031 exchange isn't just a transaction, it's a sequence of 2 transactions and potentially more. But the long game in a 1031 is a wealth building, estate building, family generational process where you think about where you want to be in the future. So I'm selling this rental house we've had for 5 or 10 years, and I'm ready to go buy some land that is farther out, or I'm ready to buy a commercial building. So when we start talking 1031, at that conversation, the very first strategy is think about what the next piece is.
Sure.
Not for 30 or 40 years down the road, but for your next 5 to 10 year investing horizon, what would that piece look like? And let me bring you some things that would look like what you're describing. And then you can start to winnow down and say, oh, these 3 don't work. This one I like a lot. It's going to be sold because it's a hot property. But 3 months from now, we'll find another one that's similar to that. So you start shopping for replacement property. Because of the time period, you start shopping even as you're bringing your first property to the market.
Exactly right.
That's the very first strategy that I want real estate agents to have when they're talking to their clients. Mm-hmm. Let's consider that we're working 2 transactions at the same time.
There's a ton of information. We've been doing this for a period of time, training and working and developing the resources, skills, knowledge, tools, techniques for today's real estate professionals for many years. All right. And one of those things we talk about the investment opportunities. Not only investment opportunities for your investors, but the investment opportunities themselves for you as a real estate professional. But you touched on something I think it's extremely important because in a lot of the programs I know we talk about, all right, is building wealth. And how is that wealth built, all right, into the fact of self-understanding how this investment is going to play in this long-term journey of this portfolio that you want to someday hopefully take a look at a retirement, all right, and utilizing real estate as a retirement vehicle, second home, maybe something of that nature itself of moving through the 1031 exchange to gain more equity, asset value, long-term equitable value. All right. And those are the things I think is extremely important. Today's real estate professional really needs to jump on it. You said in the beginning, as they take the listing, okay, they're talking about 1031. I know today's agents themselves are not talking about 1031, all right, the second they're taking the listing. I know that for a fact. They're not even talking to the individuals themselves when they're working with the buyers or when they're working with VA, okay, and those individuals themselves in the military, all right, making that plyo, that move, or they're taking on new journeys in their military career, okay? They should be talking about the investment. 2 things they're talking about. They're talking about, 1, the investment they should be, and the second thing, this is an education. We're learning. It's a learning process. And how we're going to take this and learn as much as we possibly can to be the best, maybe real estate professional and or best investor. This is going to be the largest investments. We say it all the time. It's going to be one of the largest investments that somebody ever makes. So why not capitalize on the investment, all right, through the exchange? And now how do we build that wealth vehicle going forward, all right, for this journey through holding that real estate already in its portfolio?
So, Rich, there are 2 thoughts that you bring to mind, and we talk about them regularly. If somebody wants to own $1 million investment property, you could save up money and you could get 20 or 25% down.
Right,
you just need to save $250,000.
That'll take 250 years, okay,
something like
for
that.
most people. Okay.
So you start small. You buy a small, and I'm going to pitch it as a rental house. You save up some money. You maybe even buy it with a partner. But you buy a rental house and you start paying the mortgage. You collect the rent. An investor goes in it for several reasons, but the 2 primary are cash flow and appreciation. We could go down the path of all the benefits of investing, but we'll save that for a different day. Cash flow, appreciation. I've got this rental house. A few years, the market's gone up, and the house that I bought for $100, I can sell for $200.
Exactly right.
I have built equity. I've started to build a portfolio. So let's pull that thread, hold it for a second. And the other category, and I love that you bring up the military, those folks get reassigned every couple of years, give or take. And a lot of those folks are buying a house. When they leave the house at one location, what do they do with it? They turn it into a rental property.
Could be.
They bought
if they're in that position to do that.
If they can do
that. They're on the rung.
If they can do that.
Financial positioning.
couple of ways people in the game become a good real estate investor. You start small and you grow.
Yeah.
So whether you buy a small property to start with and grow, or whether you take the house that you're living in and you convert it to an investment property. You move out, you bought it with 5% down, you bought it with a low interest rate loan, you got all those advantages, and you get reassigned. Whether you're a veteran, whether you're military, wherever you're going. A lot of people find that starting their real estate investing career works because they lived in the house. They know all about it. They know what's fixed and what's not fixed.
Right, exactly.
They rent it out. And in 5 years, when the value grows and they sell it, now they're selling an investment. And now 1031 comes into the fold.
Right.
And now they've got equity that they forgot about was happening every night when they went to bed. So as real estate agents, and some of them are in the classroom for their own book of business because they own a property or several properties. They want to know how 1031 works. And we talk continuity of ownership, and we talk tax savings. We talk about all that. But the strategy of look down the road, that's what it takes to build wealth. And while 1031 is a wealth building tool and even an estate planning tool, because the ultimate end game, you're going to die holding a bunch of these highly valued assets.
Right.
You leave them to the next generation.
Want to be able to dissolve them.
And the next generation get a step up in basis. They can sell them the next day. 1031 is a lead-in to a long-term or potentially lifetime relationship with a client.
Sure.
You bring your client a good deal. 4 or 5 years later, he or she goes to sell it. They buy something else. You find another good deal. And so as they acquire property and you become their go-to person, then one day dad says, my kids are going to get involved in the real estate and they're going to inherit this. And one day you're in a position to help the kids make their moves because you know about the portfolio. You've been able to coach them on how 1031 works.
Right, exactly. Yeah, exactly. You know, we're going to be talking about the real estate agent and their position and how they play in this. But John Mangham, all right, Craft 1031. John, if somebody wanted to know a little bit more about what we're doing, all right, we're going to bring all this education through the Value Core Institute, all right, through Rich Hart Global and through the Global Media Studios. If individuals wanted to contact you, all right, because you as being the intermediary, okay, the individual self that's going to help out in a 3-way, 4-way type transaction, when it gets into 1031, people are going to need to contact you, all righty? How can they reach you?
So the short answer, craft1031.com. C-R-A-F-T, craft1031.com.
Good.
I'm not scared to give out my phone number, 404-872, and you know the rest, 1031.
1031, right?
Don't you love that?
Paid big and dearly for that number, all right? Without a doubt.
We bought that phone number about 25 years ago.
Good deal.
Yeah,
Superb.
yeah.
Can't beat that.
But I've been doing 1031s for a long time. A tax attorney here in Atlanta sort of brought me up into the business. I started Georgia 1031. At some point, I joined a national firm. Nearly 30 years later, that firm was sold, and 2 of us from that company started Craft 1031.
Talk about Diane for a second.
Oh, my gosh.
How Diane comes into this, because I've known Diane for years too as well.
Yep.
She is a full entity between the two of you, how you bring this whole idea of Craft 1031 together. So I think our viewers really need to know that because they want to know that they're dealing with professionals. They want to know they're dealing with individuals, the one that have been in the industry that understand, because I know they may not understand it. All right, so let's talk about that for a second.
So Diane Rivera started in our headquarters office in the previous company.
Good.
And she ran the entire office. She would take the calls from closing attorneys, how you handle settlement statements, how you post things. So she has seen the nuts and bolts. She's worked the nuts and bolts. Time went by and she came to the outside doing what I do, which was calling on real estate offices, calling on closing attorneys and title companies, talking about how 1031 works. So she was doing what I was doing, which was promoting and explaining the business, providing consultation. We operate on the basis of a no-obligation phone consultation.
Great. Super.
Call me. We'll talk about it. I'll answer the questions. If we say, let's do it, then we can be in position to serve as the qualified intermediary, the facilitator, who's going to handle it from one end to the other. Diane happens to be in South Florida. We're here in Atlanta, as you know. But we have done transactions all over the country. In fact, I was thinking about this. I've got one in Arizona in motion. I've got one in Oregon that's going to be starting soon. And I've got one in Colorado.
And we need more in Georgia, folks. All right,
well,
so make sure itself.
And we can handle them literally in every state. Diane's been in this business for 30 years. The last year, she and I have been principals in Craft 1031. She's a delight to work with. Her clients who have worked with her for many years stayed with her. They love her. the title officers that she works with, the closing attorneys that she works with. So next time we do a podcast,
Right.
we'll have Diane on.
Good. Excellent.
And then we'll have somebody other than a gray-haired guy to look at.
Stop that. He's talking about me again, folks. So anyway, all right, as we just got the new course accepted, all right, through the Value Core Institute in the state of Georgia. We're going to be teaching this course all over. I can say all over the world, but that'd be globally. How's that sound? From Richard Global Inc. And so what we're going to do is we're really going to bring this course out. We're going to be offering this course themselves in our studios in Atlanta, okay, first of all, already. And the additional piece, we're going to be able to bring it out to the rest of the world, all right, individuals that really want to tie into the 1031, which now what we're going to do is we're going to tie into the real estate individual, all right? And so if you want to know a little bit more about that course coming up and those programs themselves, stay tuned, okay, because we're going to release course schedule on that. And individuals themselves, whether you're doing, because the studios here, John, you know the studios themselves. We're doing it live, we're doing it virtual, we're doing it online, whatever the case may be, in all formats of acquiring the education. Skills, knowledge, tools, techniques, the resources of understanding how this 1031 really works in the dynamics. But as all this starts to unfold, all right, I remember, all right, John taught me on 1031, okay, which was kind of, you're a very young guy. I just want to be sure. But John taught me on the 1031, and it was only right to bring the expert into the program. But now I want to get more individuals already from the real estate perspective, the investment perspective, already in and understanding this 1031. Because when it hit me first, like it's hitting everybody first, that 1031 is a little bit hard to engulf. It's a little bit hard to understand. We've got the relational rules. We said 180, 45 days and things of this nature. We understand that, okay? But when it gets into depth and details, that's where you guys step in. So let's talk about this real estate professional and the investor, okay? Because some investors themselves become real estate people, okay? And then you've got the real estate professional in today's environment that, since what we said earlier, they really need to chime into this as a point of conversation, all right? In the beginning, from a listing side, we know all these changes coming through NAR and how the negotiation goes through and how the separation of the transaction now is coming through, and you're actually putting your best foot forward, all right, really bringing value into the transaction. Here's a way, John, to bring value into the transaction from the 1031 exchange or the additional service and the provisions of these services themselves that you're helping these individuals for long term. I don't like short-term customers. You don't want short-term. We want long-term building. We're in a relationship building business, as I say all the time. And so what we want to do is be able to get this information, share it, receive, retain, release. They call it 3R principle. Receive, retain, release it. Receive it for your learning, retain it for your understanding, and then release it out to as many other individuals so they can learn. And that's what we do. We've been doing that for years. But the fact is, so let's talk about the real estate professional now. All right, how they can engage, how they can actually be and make this part of their business portfolio, all right, of getting it into the hands of their clients, okay, educating their customers, all right, and really diving in and working with the investor and as becoming an investor themselves. What do you think?
So, Rich, you bring up several things, and I want to pull the
I'm sorry
as
about
you're
that.
known to do. I want to pull the thread about our 3-hour class because we're not taking 3 hours today. We're going over the essential elements. We're going over the strategies, and we're getting ready to go over to the I like to say, how to talk the talk.
Right.
How a real estate agent, how a real estate professional can talk the talk of 1031.
Love it.
How they can walk into a conversation with confidence, not with the deer in the headlight look, 1031.
Right, exactly. Look for
You
a
want
phone
to walk in with confidence. And so using it in your business, part of the way that we're going to help them use it in their business, what we do in the 3-hour program is case studies.
Good. Love it.
And what I find is there will be people in a classroom who will say, wait, I've got a guy who, or my client asked me to get this question answered today, and they have exactly that, because I'm going over a case study where you're selling a family farm. I'm going over a case study where you're selling 5 rental houses. I'm going over, and so today's not the day to elaborate, but that's how they're going to internalize it. That's how they're going to retain it, because they're going to walk that walk.
Gotcha.
So when we talk about how do they talk the talk, I'm going to go back to the essential elements. And the way I like to teach 1031 is start with the elevator speech.
Good. Love it.
How succinct can I make my elevator speech for 1031? And I invite everybody to use this. I get on the elevator. I'm wearing a badge because I'm at a conference.
Take note.
I've got a ribbon because I'm a speaker. And somebody says, "Oh, Mr. Mangham, what do you do?" "I'm in the 1031 business." And you know what they say? "What's that?" Here we go. Here's the 3-hour course in 10 seconds. Tax savings, investment property, time period, equal or greater.
And that's free. That's your elevator speech.
And I invite the real estate agents to take that, and I say it a little jokingly, but tell your client, yeah, I can talk to 1031. It's about tax savings.
Right.
There are several layers. Talk to your CPA about that.
Right, exactly.
It's about investment property. Rental houses, raw land, commercial property. You can elaborate on each one of those building blocks. It's like building a house. You lay a good foundation, you put up a framework, and then you start hanging things on the house. You hang the windows and the doors, and then you put the appliances in, and then you start enjoying it. And then when we talk strategies, we talk, oh, well, I've got these 3 rental houses. Can I exchange them for a piece of raw land? Of course you can. So when we talk about talking the talk, we start with a framework that lets the real estate agent or the real estate professional walk in with confidence. And when you walk into a conversation, a potential listing assignment, let's say, with confidence, and there was somebody there an hour ago pitching the same potential customer, and he said something about 1031, and they said, "Oh, I've got to look into that." You go in with confidence. Who's going to get that listing?
You are.
So how do you use this in your business? How do you talk the talk? Let me talk about how you find that customer.
Okay.
And this is
Love
a
it.
shout out to all my friends who are in the real estate arena. You are in the marketing business.
Yeah.
And I love y'all because you have taught me how to be a better marketer in my business.
Exactly.
I know you're a good marketer because I get a flyer, a postcard, an email, I get a magnet, I get a football schedule, I get how to deep fry a turkey. I get all these things because you've got to stay in touch with your farm community, right? So here's one for you. What if you send out a postcard? You know how to reverse prospect, right? And what if you send a postcard to the people whose addresses are not the same as the address of the property?
There you go.
They live in some other state.
Right.
That property might be an investment property. One of the experts on what you put on billboards, no more than 5 words. So here's your freebie. Pay no taxes. Call me, Rich Hart, and your phone number. And you get the phone call. "Rich, I got your postcard. What do you mean pay no taxes?" "Well, Mr. Mangham, I understand you own the property at 123 Main Street, but you're over in Arizona. If you don't want that property anymore, if you want to sell it for any reason, and you'd like to not pay taxes, would you consider a 1031 exchange?" What's that? And then, Rich, what do you say?
Well, let's
Tax savings,
right?
Investment. And I have people in the classroom now saying the phrases. I will have you walking and talking 1031, and we can all laugh about it. I want to keep it light. If you want to do what I do, you got to go to CPA school, law school, tax school. You got to do all these crazy things. If you want to sell real estate and have confidence when you're selling investment real estate, you need to be able to talk 1031. So talking the talk is important to your business. Marketing with a 1031 can be very valuable to your business. You pick up that investor that the other real estate agent couldn't talk to, and once you've got him, I've got agents who call me for my investments, and every couple of years they call me with a deal. I love it. I love them. I love y'all. You've taught me a lot, and I hope I can teach y'all a lot.
It's funny, John, what you say, the one point itself that really hits home is, and I talk about this all my programs, all the courses themselves I teach, because I think it's extremely important that we know our position as a real estate professional. We market homes in the best light that bring the most ready, willing, able buyer to the table so we can exchange the ownership of real estate from one to another. Now, I never said anywhere along the lines that we sell real estate, and all of a sudden people click and they go, wow. So I don't have a marketing degree. It's all right. All right, you passed the multiple choice test. I got you through stage 1. But I think that's what we're doing is we're marketing to the best of light to bring the most ready, willing, able buyer to the table. All right, seller to the table, investor to the table. So we can exchange that ownership from one to another. And I think it's extremely important because we are. NAR tells us this all throughout already every programming course and highlight and everything else like this is that business doesn't fall from the sky. And we do have to market who we are, and we have to present ourselves in this light. So why not bring 1031 into the engagement, all right? And so individuals themselves know that you're the individual who's bringing this particular type of skill, this type of knowledge, all right, lo and behold, they're calling you, all right, as the individual themselves that's helping. All right. Now, John, individuals themselves, we also talk about identifying properties and things of this nature. Okay. Do you have other clients themselves that work with you to help identify, or other individuals say, look, I have this particular property, investment property, I want to look for an exchange? Does this come up every once in a while? Because that was a question always in my mind. And I threw this one at you.
You did. You did.
But tell me how this works, because I think that's a question in a lot of real estate professionals, a lot of investors' minds. I have this property, but who else do I engage with? Or and how does this engagement start?
So if you had a particular property, whether it's a piece of land, a commercial building, a rental house, whatever it may be, and you were to call me and say, I have this particular property, do you know anybody who wants it?
Right.
Who in the transaction sequence helps find the purchaser for that property? It's not the 1031 guy. It's the real estate agent. And I'm going to point it back at you and say, your marketing skills, your ability to expose a property to the market are what's going to bring a buyer. And while I may have one person who might be interested in that rental house in that part of town, that investor doesn't want to pay the price you want. You need to market that property to the broadest subsection of investors or owners in that section of town to get the best price.
Exactly. And that also drives many different ways of how we're going to market ourselves, who we're marketing to, the relationships we build with other agents around the country. Okay. Then on top of that, believe it or not, ready for this, on the international sector, so everybody knows me on the international sides, all right, to understand the international perspective out there, because now we can't leave our international folks out of this equation.
In fact, Rich, we have international owners of real estate here in the United States.
That's right.
Can they sell a property in the United States and do a 1031 exchange? Yes, they can.
Absolutely.
Yes, they can. Yep. They've got to buy a replacement in the United States.
Yeah, exactly.
They've got FIRPTA issues. Mm-hmm. Foreign investor. Yeah. But the answer is yes. So can they sell a property in a foreign country and buy it in the United States? That's not a valid 1031.
No, not valid.
But if they're already here and they've got a gain and they appreciate what this country has helped them do with their property, yes, that is absolutely a category of investor that.
But as we look to the future itself, and then we look at the potential of gains, and we're seeing that real estate is a viable investment future opportunity. We set opportunities in the beginning. Yep. I think it's extremely important ourselves that we don't leave any stone unturned, all right, that we're taking a look at what we're doing here in the United States. There are a lot of changes right now, all right? And then within those changes themselves, how we're going to incorporate that wealth that we talked about, okay, the opportunities, the essential elements that we're all bringing into this, how we're going to really relate this to not only the real estate professional, not only to what we do in our United States of America, but also bringing in now international influence into this too as well. And those are my individuals themselves in my CIPS world, Certified International Property guys, and folks themselves in there. But I think it's extremely important that 1031 exchange, all right, the 1031 process should be a universal language, all right, for today's real estate professional.
I'm going to go back to what you said in the beginning. There are people who hesitate to go into that conversation because it's uncertain. It's tax law. It's complicated.
Sure.
And if we can simplify it so you can have a sensible conversation and you know what your goals are, what your marching orders, if you will, would be, you're going to list the property. You're going to use Rich Hart to list and sell your property. At the same time, you're going to start shopping for a replacement. Now, you may want to buy a replacement in another location. You may want to buy a pretty property in a nice location with sand in the front yard and waves crashing just beyond.
Well, I know my wife's on this. She's listening. All right. And so lo and behold, you've just attracted, all right, that, all right, particular position.
So when we talk about the military investor, the foreign investor, the vacation property investor, I never know in a classroom which one of my case studies or examples is going to resonate with somebody.
Yeah.
And when you're marketing, as I love my real estate friends because they've taught me about marketing. When you're marketing, you don't know which client you're going to reach who's ready to pick up the phone and call you and say, Rich, I got your postcard or I saw your email and this topic is now pertinent. Last year it wouldn't have been. And that's why you have to keep repetitively reaching out there and with different messages because people are going to come at different times.
Right.
So being prepared to discuss all the facets, all the aspects of a 1031 exchange, all the different kinds of like-kind property, how it all works. In a short podcast, we can hit the highlights. We can cover the essential elements. Right now. We can cover a few strategies to maybe tickle your mind. But wait, there's more. We won't take that kind of time today. But this is applicable to anybody who's interested in investing in real estate. I even get people coming to the class who say, I want to start investing. Well, they're not selling anything. They don't need a 1031 today.
That's right.
But they're going to know about it. So in a few years, after they bought something and it's grown, they're already going to have a framework for using the tool.
It's a tool in the toolbox. They've got to expand on it. All right. It is a different tool used for different jobs.
And
all right.
And investors will tell you that 1031 is one of the most valuable tools they have. You can use it over and over. There's no limit on how many 1031s you can do. It's just limited on how many properties you have. And how many properties are you allowed to buy? There's no theoretical limit.
And tax deferred.
And tax deferred. That's exactly right.
Which we love it out there. So, John, we've covered a lot of base today. Okay. Any last words themselves that we want to bring up to our listeners? All right. When it comes to 1031. Go 1031. But any last words themselves we want to bring up for our listeners, investors, could be those individuals themselves in military, could be our real estate professionals, could be just an individual themselves who is out on their own, doesn't know too much about, has a particular type of real estate or within a business or a dynamic of, and they want to engage in something different. You know, real estate itself is not a forever thing based on one property. You're going to find an intended use, hopefully somewhere along the lines, whether that intended use is for business, whether the intended use is for private, or whether the intended use itself is for the exchange or investment. All right, but utilizing these tools themselves as a tax deference, okay, what a great tool. What a great opportunity.
So if I'm going to leave anybody with, thoughts on 1031, first of all, if you're not familiar with it, don't be afraid of it.
That's right.
I've been proud of people commenting to me, you made this easy. You took a tough topic and you made it understandable. I can make it difficult. I can read from the tax code, but you can do that. One of the interesting questions I've been answering, the category of questions I've been answering a lot over the last couple of years, people will call me and say, I read this. I saw this on the internet. Well, there's a little more to it. It is a little more technical than what you read. And so while it can be a minefield and it can be, we want to keep people on the path. That's part of what we do when we serve as the facilitator in the exchange. We keep people on the path.
Good.
We don't want you to be afraid of approaching the transaction. We don't want you to be afraid of selling or buying. You focus on those tasks. We'll take care of the rest of the paperwork. We want that package of documents to stand up if the IRS should happen to pick your number and say, we want to review this transaction.
Right.
From the contract to the settlement statement to the target ID letter to the next contract, next settlement statement to the tax return. Every piece of that builds a file that is what protects your tax savings.
Right.
And that's where we come in, is having that kind of conversation.
Sure.
We want to be a support. We want to be a resource. We want to help people with their 1031 exchanges. Obviously, we're in this business and have been for a long, long time. But I've had a lot of fun working with real estate agents, real estate professionals, investors, attorneys, CPAs for a lot of years. There's something very gratifying about helping to keep the tax dollars at work in the local economy instead of sending them to Washington.
Sure, exactly.
And I have fun with that.
Without a doubt. John, how did they reach you one more time in Craft 1031?
It's www.craft, C-R-A-F-T, 1031, the numbers, 1031.com. Craft1031.com. Call me, call Diane, whoever it appeals to you to call. Be happy for you to reach out.
John, thank you very much for coming in, without doubt. So, folks, themselves, in the future, you're going to see the 1031 exchange course being offered through the EvalueCore Institute. We're here to help you. We're here to guide you. We're here to lead you, and especially in all our courses and programs themselves going forward. All right, we look forward to seeing and working and developing a relationship with you, because we, after all, we are in a relationship building business. Look for us, watch for us, and coming to you real soon. Thank you very much. We'll see you on the flip side. Have a great day, and God bless.